Hello, everybody. Welcome to the channel. We're live from Los Angeles. Going to have a live stream today about a very specific topic, a new release mainly, which will allow me also to talk a little bit about this smaller brand, Chinese brand, established by two young Frenchmen, a brand that finds itself at the juncture of two cultures, maybe more than two, but mainly between French and Chinese. A brand whose name is Atelier, which apparently translates directly culture workshop. I mean, the Atelier part is pretty straightforward, being the French word for culture. We are going to talk about their new release, Ancestra. I'm going to try to see if we can watch some of their videos together that talk about the process of making and choosing the new movement, and also the production that goes into making their new hand-hammered dial. But I'll start by talking a little bit about the watch that I'm wearing, which is one of their perception models. This is not their first watch, actually. When they first launched in 2017 and had their Kickstarter campaigns later in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, they were focusing on this simple dress watch that was called Porcelain Odyssey, if I'm not mistaken. Let's pull up a few examples of that. This is a collection that's been retired, simple dress pieces with porcelain dials, of course, still bringing something original to the table, something that you can't really find all that often from some of the more established brands or from other micro brands for that matter. But their break really took place when they released the Perception, right, of which there have been many limited edition models spawned out, especially some of the collaborations they did with the magazine Revolution have been the center of discussion and some small controversy. And I do want to say a few things about that later down the road. But essentially, they have done quite well to jump on that bandwagon, one might say, off the integrated bracelet watch, the so-called sports chic genre, with a time-only piece that has at its centerpiece a hand-turned dial that is really quite impressive. Overall, I think the quality of the watch does genuinely feel right for its price point, which I think today is around $3,300. The case design is, of course, not the most original, but it also cuts I think takes certain elements from obviously the original integrated bracelet watch, the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, as it was designed by Jarajanta. Later on, of course, he would give to Patek Philippe their design Nautilus. But I think if you were to really focus on one particular design to which this watch is most similar, that would be perhaps the square version of the Vacheron Constantin 222, which in fact has also been compared to the Nautilus, to the Cubitus that has recently been released by Patek Philippe as their new sports watch in the genre. So that only goes by way of saying that the major brands themselves are not are also prone to this sort of cultural influence, these sorts of iterative designs. I really do like the bracelet. It has these wonderful individually articulated links. That also in this second generation have chamfered details for the center links as well, which gives the piece a kind of visual depth that, again, you don't necessarily find at this price point. There's a little bit of, maybe with that articulation, you might lose perhaps some of the heft you would be used to in luxury watches. Coming from the field of vintage, of course, I've never prioritized that particular feeling. So I actually like how lithe and how limber this whole thing is. I like the way they captured one important element of that integrated bracelet watch design, which in all the three originals, and I'm talking about the two Jaragenta designs, the Royal Oak and the Nautilus, as well as the later Jörg Haschek design in Vacheron 222, you're talking about pieces that, of course, have this sporty, dynamic element, but are essentially at their core very sleek, elegant pieces that take after some of the ultra-thin dress watches, in fact, that these so-called holy trinity of Swiss watchmakers were famous for at the time, especially. So when you look at the Royal Oak, when you look at the Nautilus, when you look at the Vacheron 222, all of them being powered by the Jaeger-LeCoultre caliber 920 base and its variations, you have watches that are ultra thin, that are very sleek and elegant, and that sit very close to your wrist. A lot of the brands that jumped on this bandwagon as a trend much later on seem to have missed the memo on that. I won't name any brands, but Atelier Wen's design, I think, again, not being quite ultra thin, really captures that idea of having a design that sits very close to the wrist. It has a very particular kind of case back that's interestingly decorated. Not quite an exhibition case back, and we will come to that point later on, where their new release actually has a full exhibition case back. But I think overall the wearing experience, and I wanted to take it out for a spin from a friend I've been wearing it on and off for the last 3 days is amazing. I haven't tried the rubber band yet, and that's a good time to reach over there and show you the presentation box as well. This is also a great presentation. I've already smudged the box a little bit, so I apologize for that, but it opens up quite nicely. There's a cleaning cloth if we need that, a little tool when you need to change between the bracelet and the rubber strap, a little booklet here that has all that lovely information and some of the marketing flannel that accompanies these kinds of things, and a nice travel case as well, which is where the rubber strap currently is. And I want to thank my friend Ben for lending me his watch so I can talk about the brand in a more hands-on way. Again, the rubber strap is quite nice, and I think that sort of modularity is something that today's collectors really came to expect from so-called integrated bracelet watch genre. Really, once again. The other great thing about the bracelet is actually it has a clasp with a quick adjust. Again, something that you don't find in many major brands, that gives you that sort of playroom, when your wrist itself expands and contracts. I mean, it's really a quality piece at the price point. And I have, again, not to take shots at other brands, but the Tissot PRX, of course, seems to have been quite dominant at that entry level when it comes to this genre of a watch. I don't see as much conversation and posting about them at this point, which makes me feel like the hype has died down and we can perhaps be a little more honest now when we talk about them. That feels like a cheap watch. It is what it is, right? I don't think we need to have a pretense about that piece being a great value, because it is at that price point. But it does leave something to be desired, especially if you have previously collected at a higher segment and you have just taken that piece on as something to play around with. This watch doesn't feel cheap at all. I think it feels exactly right at that price point. Now, there's something that we need to talk about when it comes to the dial, which has a very unique guilloche pattern, and is really the visual centerpiece of the watch's aesthetics. When the brand first came out with this piece in particular, they had front-loaded a lot of information about how their guilloche master, Master Cheng, was the only person who did this kind of work in China, and that he had himself, in fact, developed the entire machinery himself, the entire rose engine himself, where he, in fact, came up with a different system that produces a similar quality of work to the Swiss masters. And it is important also to at least mention how the word guilloche itself within Swiss watchmaking and within European watchmaking writ large has been used quite loosely in the last decade or so, where you have anything from stamped dials to actual hand engraved pieces called guilloche, right? You can seemingly market something as a guilloche dial and really have very little human intervention in the entire process, at least the work of a human hand. You can have those sorts of patterns originally designed by an actual master guillocheur, so to speak, that would be then stamped onto a dial blank. You can have CNC guided work, again, that is on slightly on the other end of the spectrum. Laser engraved work, that's of course even less desirable than CNC guided. And then work that is done by actual masters from those who work at Breguet, Patek, Jaeger-LeCoultre, especially at higher price points, to those, for example, who work on these shores, like the artisans at J.N. Shapiro, Josh Shapiro, and other members of his team. This piece, I think, again, gives you a great compromise at the price point, because it has the involvement of human hand, as we were just looking at from that perception page. But the machine is set up a little differently, and I won't go into the kind of detail that would get too technical on this presentation, because that's not really the point. But when you're working on a classic rose engine, or even a straight line lathe, to do this sort of hand engraving, your left hand, of course, turns, but your right hand essentially applies the kind of necessary pressure with the same sort of consistency throughout when you're applying these sorts of complicated patterns. And George Daniels writes in his book on watchmaking that it is actually your right hand, in this case, your hand that applies the right amount of pressure consistently, that is the harder parts of your training as a guillocheur, as someone who turns these engines. Apparently, Master Cheng's machinery has all sorts of simplified adjustments on the right-hand side. That makes this process a little more open to industrial scale, so to speak. And unlike some of the implications of the earlier marketing copy, he actually works with a number of apprentices, and that much was obvious from some of the videos that they have posted on their own channels, where they take turns in a manner of 8-hour shifts. I think I read somewhere, where they ultimately take cumulatively about 36 hours or something to apply. Again, that was initially presented as a virtue of this kind of work, but it's really something that someone who is better trained and who's more experienced, and I'm given to understand that someone, to become a master of this art needs at least 5, perhaps up to 10 years of work, those 10,000 hours, so to speak, that you need to put in before you can actually get to a level where you would be able to complete these sorts of dials 8 to 9 hours, 8 to 10 hours in total. So that 36-hour part of the marketing copy was really about how long their process takes, which is not necessarily something that makes it better. That being said, again, I think the pattern is very captivating, especially in this sort of time-only 3-hander watch. Draws your eye into the center of the design, which is really beautiful, unique pattern that ultimately leaves very little to be desired, right? I think you have a good amount of human imperfection mixed in with some measure of serialized production, and it's good to see traces of both on a watch like this, where the end product, I think, is a decent compromise. Captain Kirk makes a very interesting and nice point here. He says his, I think we are referring to Master Cheng here, his austere basement studio is quite different from the Swiss loft studio with the Swiss mountains showing through the windows. Indeed. But you see, I mean, it's, maybe I'm too cynical, but that's also part of marketing, right? In the sense that you are presenting different experiences of production. You're focusing on different elements of production in terms of relaying the experience to your customer, where one is based in this idealization of austerity, where Chinese manufacture can go mano a mano with anything on the world. And I think there's a truth in that, and that there's something to be defended and even valorized in that. And the Swiss themselves, of course, have really made that artisanal craftsmanship that belongs to a particular region of even their country, not only the entire country, even like, the valley especially, and the entire setting, right, with its history of how, in fact, people who were snowed into their villages made this craft into what it is today. is part of that story where from the 70s onwards, the Swiss were much more focused on presenting a luxury element of that craftsmanship as it survives into our current time, rather than basing the story on efficient manufacturing methods, chronometric precision, so on and so forth. John says, how's the quality of movements in both the Perception and Ancestra Jiao? Ancestra's movement video we are going to watch in a moment, and I'll try to talk a little bit about that. I think the Perception's movements for the price point are fine, but I have to be honest, it's really the weak point of the whole package. It is the Achilles heel of the whole package. So I'm not surprised that they went in another direction with the new model, with the Ancestra Jiao. And again, I'm sorry for especially the second part of that name. Please forgive me. I don't speak a single word of Chinese. What I can say is that this movement is not something that that you wouldn't be accustomed to if you have a couple of watches from the Seiko Prospects line. I think I would put it at around the same level with that. The movement, I think, is called Dandong SL 1588. Automatic movement, beats at 4 hertz, has, I think, around 40 hours of power reserve, and it's advertised as plus minus 10 seconds per day. I don't think precision was again at the top of their mind when they came up with this movement, when they when they came up with this whole package, right? Because at the end of the day, again, I think I do believe that Robin and Wilfried are very genuine guys who are quite passionate about horology, but they're just as passionate about telling a story. So they wanted to have a watch that's aesthetically appealing, that's quite usable and wearable on an everyday basis, but also a watch that was Chinese inside out, right? From every single part of the movement down to each link of the bracelet, right? So they had to find a movement that could be used at this scale, and that would be practical for the price point, and that would not only serve the purpose, but also add another layer into that narrative of presenting Chinese manufacturing at this level to the horological world. And I think it does a great job. My friend Ben told me that if you look at the periphery of the dial, right? Let me find a better picture here, right? You have this key-like design that looks like the Greek keys, but apparently there's a counterpart in Chinese culture. Again, forgive my ignorance. It is a 5-part design, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So you can still count 5 seconds, I guess, but it doesn't have like a finely calibrated seconds track The movement itself doesn't have hacking seconds, right? Which people love geeking about at this price point. So that can be understood as a drawback. You see some shortcomings that I guess come with using a generic movement. Like, I think the crown at this point could have been a little better integrated to the case, right? You know, maybe if not sitting quite flush, they could have used the left flank of the case as crown guards. I think that's also partly a question of using the generic movement, and perhaps also the scale in terms of not only building a certain kind of case, but also machining and perfecting a certain size of a crown. Ultimately, I think the movement leaves something to be desired, and it would be probably one aspect of the watch that I would describe as a genuine weakness for this price point. Everything else, I think, feels 100% right, and quite delivers. And again, that quick adjust, clasp is something that you don't find at pieces that are even at a higher price point. And I do appreciate its existence, because I have very slim wrists already. So when a watch fits, it fits perfectly. When it doesn't, it doesn't, unless you have these sorts of shortcuts, which allows this watch to wear really well for me. I haven't complained about the slight pinching I have from these articulating links, because an average human being is not as hairy as I am. So unless you're going to put this watch on your dog's wrist or something, you probably don't have to worry about that. But we can start talking about the Ancestra now. Of course, if you have any other questions, you should feel absolutely free to post them in the chat. I do apologize about the background noise. I live in downtown LA, and it seems that in the summertime they use Pershing Square for a lot of public concerts. God bless them. I don't really partake. So it's kind of a nuisance, but anyway. The Ancestra Jiao is just launched. They had about a week long of an order window. Perhaps it was 8 days. The watches are slated for delivery in the second quarter of 2026. However, there's now less than 2 days left. So it's about time to make up your mind. I have already waxed quite poetic about the case design, which has these kind of shouldered lugs that I always appreciated. The dial preserves, but also perhaps takes forward the kind of handwork that they have put at the center of their watches, even with Porcelain Odyssey, right? The porcelain dials were really one of the most important aspects of the watch's aesthetics, if not the centerpiece of its presentation. You have the guilloche dials in perception, and here you have a hand-hammered dial that's akin to the craft of martelage and we are gonna watch the video for that. But I think I will start with the story of the movement, which I think they do again a great work in tying it up to the brand's own story and the brand's own heritage. Right, at the end of the day, this is a brand that puts Chinese manufacturing at the heart of its story, but it's also a brand that has been founded by two Europeans, two Frenchmen, who have made it their mission to present Chinese watchmaking to a global audience that takes full advantage of their aspects of their strengths in industrial manufacturing. So it shouldn't surprise that they went with a French movement, a French-made movement, for the beating heart of this watch. And for the first time, it is fully exhibited through a sapphire case back. It does also have a beautiful open worked oscillating weight, which allows for that display to shine. And I'm given to understand, again, not that I can read it. The bridges are inscribed with an old Chinese poem, and that's a very unique decoration. And as you see, those key-like designs also make their appearance on the decoration of this rotor too, which has otherwise a few more elements. The caliber EPM 03 has, beyond the fact that it is a French movement, is even on the spec sheet superior to the earlier movement. It has around 65 hours of power reserve. It's made by Pekinier, which is a manufacturer in the French watchmaking town of Morteau, which, not coincidentally, is near the French-Swiss border, and is also home to one of the most prestigious horological schools of its kind. I think it's called Lycée Edgar Faure. It's also much more precise, -4 +6 seconds per day, which is a chronometer rate. And in fact, they apparently Pekinier subjects the movements to 16 continuous days of observation and testing, which is above and beyond the 10 days required by COSC, and closer to the standards of the chronometric precision defined by the French Besançon Observatory, adjusted manually in 6 positions and for temperature fluctuations as well. But let's take a look at their own video, which I will pull up right here. There's so much content, seemingly. It's been harder to find their channel. There we go. Right here. These two videos are, or maybe we can, yeah, let's watch these two videos. Now, the video on the movement specifically is in French. There are subtitles, but I will have to stop anyways every so often to comment. So I will supply some of my translation. This is the town of Morteau.
Le mouvement EPM03 est né en futur, c'est-à-dire qu'on l'appelle l'EPM03, est né en 2021.
By the way, my left speaker of the laptop has blown out, so that's the irritating noise you are hearing. So I'm very sorry about that.
Le mouvement EPM03, on l'a d'abord fait pour la marque Pékinier, pour répondre à la demande du marché qui souhaite des montres un peu plus petites.
So they are talking about how the EPM 03 movement was created as a compact caliber because of the industry-wide demand of making watches that are a little bit smaller. So this is a movement that's smaller in diameter and thinner as well. And it's something Pékinier makes their own watches, but this is one of those movements, and it's their third movement that they are also making available to other brands that want to produce pieces at scale.
Donc le fait de faire un mouvement un peu moins compliqué et un peu plus petit, ça nous a permis de répondre à la demande du marché. Ensuite, c'est aussi pour proposer une alternative aux autres marques, les mouvements qui sont standards et qui inondent un peu.
And obviously, one important element, one important justification for this, for the existence of this movement is not only that it does offer a fully automatic, full rotor caliber, but it's also offering an alternative to a lot of the generic Swiss movement makers, right? This is a movement that's made in France.
Le marché de manière massive,
I think
d'avoir dans les montres des mouvements faits en plus petite série et qu'on ne peut pas trouver partout dans le monde. Ce calibre, on l'a voulu français avant tout, c'est-à-dire qu'on voulait proposer une alternative au mouvement suisse, proposer une alternative française. Donc il a 72% des composants qui viennent de France.
72% of the components for the movement come from France.
Et 100% des composants viennent dans un rayon de 80 km autour de la manufacture.
100% come from a radius of 80 kilometers around the manufacturer, and that's where what I said comes in, right? You know, it is a town that is basically in the bordering region between France and Switzerland. So when you draw a radius of 80 kilometers, you should be, in fact, able to find everything that you need. It is an ideal part of France to build a genuine watchmaking ecosystem.
Ce mouvement, on le voulait fin, donc il fait 4,2 mm d'épaisseur et 28 mm de diamètre. Il a aussi une autre spécificité, c'est qu'il n'est pas interchangeable avec aucun mouvement, c'est-à-dire qu'on voulait que...
In diameter, and it's not a clone of another movement, right? It's not interchangeable with any other movement that is already in the market.
La marque qui fasse le choix de choisir un mouvement français, la garde et ne puisse pas changer de marque de mouvement au gré du vent. C'est-à-dire qu'on travaille vraiment en collaboration avec les marques qui veulent avoir ce mouvement dans leur montre. Quand on a créé le mouvement...
And he's also saying that that's because also we expected a certain commitment from our partners, right? That they won't change their mind at some phase of production where they will say, oh, okay, we'll change the suppliers. We will rather use Silita, not ETA, so on and so forth, right? When you have a specific, when you have a certain specification where you have a specific architecture that differs from any other movements, where your movement is not interchangeable with what is already on the market, from the side of the manufacturer, you at least have that sort of commitment when people sign up with you that they won't change horses as they are crossing the river, so to speak.
Au PM03, on a voulu apporter des spécificités supplémentaires par rapport à ce qu'on trouve sur le marché. C'est-à-dire qu'on a 65 heures de réserve de marche. Ensuite, on a un remontage du mouvement très efficace avec un inverseur avec le système Peloton, qui est plus connu sous le nom de Magic Lever. Le gros avantage qu'il a, c'est qu'il permet d'avoir un mouvement
to the Peloton system that you might have heard from IWC. It also has the so-called Magic Lever, where the slightest movement starts basically winding the watch. So that's something that increases the winding efficiency.
Très fin et très peu d'usure. C'est-à-dire que les inverseurs, on sait très bien, c'est vraiment le gros point noir des mouvements dans l'horlogerie. Cet inverseur-là a la réputation d'être très fiable et un peu compliqué à mettre au point au début, mais après, une fois qu'il est mis au point, il a une durée de vie presque infinie, quoi.
And apparently it's also,
alors Atelier Wine nous a donné un design à la base. On a dû faire pas mal d'allers-retours pour arriver sur quelque chose de mûr pour pouvoir passer en production derrière. L'idée, c'était de partir du design d'Atelier Wine et d'intégrer le savoir-faire de nos fournisseurs.
And they developed this movement in collaboration with Atelier Wine.
Pour arriver à quelque chose de réalisable et d'esthétique à la fin. Le challenge de ce mouvement, c'est vraiment la plaque arrière qui nécessite beaucoup d'opérations successives et qui est très fine. Cette plaque fait 0,25 mm d'épaisseur et on va venir graver les caractères chinois avec plus de 0,10 mm de profondeur.
The back plate where you have that engraving, laser engraving, as it turns out, of that Chinese poem with the Chinese characters was apparently the most difficult part to develop. And again, he was talking about a certain compromise they have achieved between aesthetics and techniques, right? Between certain visually appealing demands that Atelier Wen made with their design and what they can feasibly produce at scale, right? They had to find compromise between those two demands.
C'est-à-dire que le challenge, c'était de faire toutes ces opérations sans que la pièce vrille et qu'elle reste plate pour garantir ses fonctions techniques dans le mouvement. Atelier One nous a pas mal challengé sur une autre décoration qui est le polybloqué. Ils nous ont demandé de faire cette décoration sur le pont de balancier.
Also, beyond that distinctive backplate, the bridges, the movement does have decorative elements that make that exhibition case back worthwhile, and those are specifically parts of the movement that are black polished, starting with.
Et la roue de renvoi de rocher. Quand on fait une pièce polybloquée en laiton, il y a souvent des piqûres qui apparaissent, de la peau d'orange, et c'est vrai que comme c'est sur une surface plate, ça se voit vraiment énormément à l'œil. Donc nous avons dû travailler avec notre fournisseur pour trouver la bonne matière. On a changé la matière de ces composants-là pour qu'après polybloqué, on ait quelque chose de polymiroir, sans point et sans peau d'orange. Il y a eu aussi un vrai travail avec le designer au niveau de la masse, au niveau du rotor. La masse du rotor est vraiment importante et on ne peut pas faire autre.
The rotor is made out of tungsten to achieve the necessary mass. Even in this open works specification, and it is, I believe, pink gold plated.
Tant de trous qu'on veut dans la masse. Donc on a dû trouver vraiment un design qui allie le poids et l'ouverture. Et on est arrivé au design final qui permet certes d'avoir une grande ouverture, mais aussi qui permet de remonter le mouvement. C'est une masse qui est en tungstène monobloc. Donc la première opération, c'est l'usinage de cette masse-là, où on vient détourer toutes les formes. Ensuite, on va venir faire au laser une texture qui tenait à cœur à Atelier Wen, c'est un grainé. Et ensuite, on va venir traiter la masse appliquer un plaquage d'or 5N. Le retors, c'est une finition particulière, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a d'abord un colimaçonnage sur le dessus de la masse et sur le chanfrein. Et ensuite, il y a la frise caractéristique de la marque Atelier Wen qui est effectivement aussi fait au laser. Une fois que le mouvement est monté, on le passe au simulateur de portée pendant 2 semaines afin que chaque pièce puisse trouver son emplacement et d'effectuer un léger rodage. Ensuite, les pièces sont reprises à l'atelier pour faire un dernier réglage final. Tous nos mouvements sont réglés sur 6 positions. Et chaque position est réglée entre -4 et +6 secondes par jour, avec une moyenne à plus ou moins 2 secondes par jour. Grâce à ce réglage vraiment très fin, nous pouvons passer les tests de l'Observatoire de Besançon vraiment très facilement et avoir la certification Vipère avec un taux de rebut vraiment très faible. Alors quand on conçoit un mouvement, c'est pas pour une durée faible, c'est-à-dire un mouvement, il est fait pour durer 20, 30, 40 ans. C'est-à-dire que quand on conçoit un mouvement, quand on le fabrique, on achète des composants en quantité pour pouvoir assurer la réparation sur le long terme.
And they are essentially saying that they have signed up for the long term. So it's not just one run of movements, but enough resources and components and parts, in fact, that will last them for decades, which is, of course, important when it comes to servicing, right? That's one reason why a lot of independent makers, when they are at their humble beginnings, one reason as to why they use generic movements is precisely that, right? Because they have customers that want to trust their vision, that want to sign on with them for the long term, but you never know. You never know how long people will stay around, whether they will be even around when time comes for the first service in your watch's lifetime, right? So that's the advantage of one, using a relatively generic movement that you then customize and decorate according to your own specifications and vision. Two, collaborating with a larger manufacturer where movement making is their expertise and where they can, in fact, with that know-how and with their resources, with those specific parts and components, guarantee the service of your movement for decades to come, right? It's not just a one-off hobby horse that will fall by the wayside after merely a generation. And that's, I think that's very important for watches, especially we are so passionate about mechanical watches, to use the fashionable term, because they are sustainable. To put it more romantically, we are so enamored with mechanical watches because they constitute in so many ways that object-like link that brings together one generation with the next. Because mechanical watches can be passed from one generation to the next. And when they have that ability to remain in working condition beyond our ability of aesthetically contemplate these objects, that adds so much more to not only their value, but also to our personal experience. So props to Atelier Wen and Pékinier for collaborating on this movement on EPM 03 that actually offers a vision that goes beyond a single production cycle. It's not a throwaway project. It's not just meant to impress the customers in one particular production cycle. It's supposed to, in fact, last for decades, if not longer.
La manufacture Pékinier, c'est la fabrication de mouvements, mais c'est aussi la réparation. Nous avons un service après-vente très performant et avec assez de composants qui permet de réparer la montre pendant toute la durée de sa vie.
I think that's a very compelling package, right? And I do respect what our friend John Chen was saying in the chat, that the watch looks nice, only wished it was priced closer to the perception. I respect that. But that being said, maybe the watch has elements that justify that jump from around 32,000 to, I think, 58. Sorry, not 32,000. What am I talking about? 3,300. 3,300 to 5,850. Again, at this price segment, that's a lot. That's a significant jump. That's basically a 50% premium above it, right? So it is significant at this price point, but we have covered one aspect of the added value, which was the newly developed movement, French-made, in that traditional watchmaking town of Morteau, by a manufacturer that can guarantee not only scale, but also sustainability with their ability of making those components and offering the after-sales service. And the other aspect, of course, is the dial, which requires even more handwork than the Perception series with its specific guilloche dial. So let's dive into that. This is a video that they have on their own YouTube channel about the workshop of Kong Lingjun for the making of these dials.
在全世界没有任何一个国家或者任何一个团队敢说他能做出来两个一模一样的珐琅。
So the master started by talking about how no two enamel dials are created equal.
咱们珐琅的准备是非常严谨的，我们熬料的提纯，研磨，完了之后到烧制珐琅，它要严格的控制好整个的叫无缝连接的一套流程。
This is exactly the hand hammering process, right? And it's quite impressive because how we are not talking at this point about even kind of a pneumatic tool that's used, for example, in that traditional Florentine finish, in the Tuscan dials of old, which, by the way, is a process that's been forsaken, that's fallen by the wayside by now for most European brands. So to see literally someone with a pin and a hammer applying a certain kind of finish on the dial is great. I mean, again, whether you like the pattern or not, that's something that's quite subjective, that I can't really comment on. But the fact that you get that rigor on the one hand, but also arbitrariness, and in fact inconsistency, imperfection of the handwork, so close to the surface in a watch, I think it's really precious.
我们一个表面，我们大概要捶打接近上千个锤纹，那也就是说，有2到3个锤纹有深度不一的同时，这就是一个废弃的表面，因为它一旦上完珐琅之后，你下面的捶打的高低纹就展露无遗。
And again, it's a work. It's the kind of handwork that requires a level of consistency, because again, on a surface like this, if you were using, let's say, if you were using something like this as a case back, just for kicks, it could be fine. But once you apply enamel and once you give it a color, that sort of consistency might become an eyesore, and that's what Kong Linjun was intoning there. That's what he's drawing attention to. By the way, that scene is very important for future reference, I think, because the color for this launch/limited edition is very specific, and I'm sure, just like they had variations of the Porcelain Odyssey, just like they had editions of the Perception, I'm pretty sure that they will have later down the line different takes on this Ancestra concept, and chances are that we will see different colors of enamel applied on these dials, and you can already get a hint here. I'm particularly looking forward to the jade color for myself. Let's hope that comes through.
它的整个的这个色彩的调配，对于我们珐琅师提出了很高的一个难度，因为我们要提炼出不同色彩的蓝，有淡蓝，再淡一点，再淡一点，再深一点。也就是说，我们一个表面上要运用到10几种蓝色才能。
And of course, it's not a single blue, right? They are essentially mixing and blending colors to the extent that there's more than 10 different shades on this relatively small surface of the dial.
烧制出这种
it's quite great
交错感的。每一个颜色它都会有相差的温度，不同的层次叠加出来的温度是不一样的。
Well, we have already a glimpse there.
珐琅是双面的艺术，我们的正面做的美，背面也要做到极其的严苛。如果你的背面是0.3的厚度，那正面是0.25，那它的受热度就不一样，它就极其形成这种变形或者是炸裂的这种过程。 这种的蓝色深邃湛蓝的表盘，它表达的方式是一种就像我们大海一样，放眼望去。
Yeah, it is really dynamic, and the picture that it conjures is the ebb and flow of ocean waves.
这是看到海底，它的颜色也是不同的在变换。国际的顶级品牌的珐琅，一定是属于顶级收藏家才有资格去采购的。所以说，从这点来看，你就知道珐琅的价值到底有多高。现在工业制造业非常的先进，现在拼的是不是简单的设计。
Again, I think this is added value as well, right? Because that sort of hand-hammered dial with an enamel finish on top of it, you don't really see every day at an accessible price point at all, right? We are talking about at that level the Moritz Gossmans of the world, or some of the limited, very rarefied Lange Handwerkskunst editions. So it's, again, the price jump is significant from the 3,300 of the Ancestra to 5,850. Sorry, from the 3,300 of the Perception to the 5,850 of the Ancestra, but at least they are doing something new and something that you can rarely find anywhere else, including some of the rarefied realms of Swiss and German watchmaking. They're offering at a relatively accessible price point, and I find that still quite commendable.
现在更多的是制造的一个细节，是制造的精密度、打磨每一个细节的传承，每一个细节的这个把握的这个技术的这种成熟度。高端品牌敢于与世界顶级品牌同台竞争，这是一个非常巨大的一个挑战。所以说呢，罗宾和阮先生这个团队做得非常的棒。
Diamonds and Chinese characters that alternate with those baguette cut diamonds as well. And I love how they are quite different from each other. If you look at this rendering, for example, you'll notice that in the Chinese version, you have the 6 baguette cut diamonds at 12, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And with the Arabic numeral version, since you have the Arabic numerals starting with number 12, you have the baguette cut diamonds at 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11. And here are the two of these pieces next to each other. Here's another look at that movement, EPM 03. Again, 65 hours of power reserve, minus 4 plus 6. Rigorously tested, adjusted manually in 6 positions. Levels of decoration, I think that at least justify, at least legitimate giving this watch an exhibition case back. and it's not only present in the laser engraved elements of the base plate and the open work rotor, but also in the black polished finishing of the balance bridge as well as the return ratchet wheel. And of course, the beyond the bridge plate, there's also the classic perlage, the circular graining done on the base plate of the movement. And I really like the diamonds as well. I was talking with a friend who is actually in the diamond and jewelry business. I was showing him a watch that I saw with another maker where they were using lab-grown diamonds. And he was telling me that that's just really part of, well, I mean, the word we used was shtick. But essentially, my friend was making the argument that it is part of the story that they're trying to tell, and the idea that they were using more sustainable and affordable elements to offer that kind of watch. And I did ask him on that moment, you know, would it make much difference in terms of the price point if they used real natural diamonds? And he said no. And basically, just a couple of days after that discussion, this watch was unveiled to the mainstream. And in fact, it does have actual diamonds, real diamonds, baguette cut, not quite invisibly set as you would see perhaps at the highest level with brands like Rolex and Patek, but quite elegantly executed to the point that it looks really organic. You see the setting a little bit here at the tail end, so to speak. Oops. But it's quite elegant in terms of its execution. I appreciate it. And beyond, of course, this particular edition, it is a new product line for them. So I'm sure they will also continue developing different variations of the perception. They have started using titanium as a material for this. Some of the first examples of that series is being delivered. They have started experimenting with tantalum, and I'm sure that might make its way to the Ancestra series as well. From the videos that we have already seen from within that enameling workshop, there are already a few different colors of these martelage enamel dials that they have executed. I'm sure they will have interesting runs with those. I think it's an exciting development for the brand. I think it's a very interesting, fascinating, and an original way of retelling their story, which is one of East-West encounter, which is one of French and Chinese collaboration. And this particular model, in terms of its constructive elements, really brings that to the fore, having a Chinese watch with a French movement, something that was developed within the parameters of Atelier Wen's design by Pékinier in Morteau, France. I think we have something very interesting in our hands, and I want to end on this note, and I will turn to the chat and answer some of your questions, perhaps, or some of the points that you have raised earlier. And if you have any other questions before I close, please feel free to send them in. Whether you want to contribute to the channel or not, you know that's always so appreciated by me. And again, as someone who works independently, that is what allows me to provide content to you at this level, hopefully with increasing quantity and quality down the road. So anything that you can send is very important. That can be as little and as free as a like, the sharing of a link with another collector or a watch enthusiast, following me also on Instagram, and I will drop the link right there in the chat as well. Or using any of the ways that YouTube provides you, super chat, super thanks once the live stream ends, when you're leaving a comment, or signing up for a membership or gifting a membership, which will give you access to a good archive of exclusive content. So keep those in mind. If you prefer other ways, I describe them in the description to this video, so feel free to check that out as well. But I was just making a note that beyond just storytelling, I think transparency is becoming something more than a virtue in watchmaking and in luxury retail more broadly. And again, it's becoming something that provides genuine value. We are at a stage today where a lot of Swiss brands, using the standards of Swissness to the fullest extent, where they are in fact getting a lot of components made abroad and a lot of times in China, getting a lot of the parts and elements of their watches made in China and later assembled in Switzerland. And since the labor costs are so high, and since roughly 60% of the value of the watch being generated in Switzerland certifies it as Swiss made, the Swiss watch you own is more Chinese made than you might know and realize. And here we have a brand that in fact builds its brand equity, that constructs its value by primarily being Chinese made, right? By in fact front-loading this idea of Chinese manufacturing being able to take on anything, and in this particular case, specifically Swiss, German, and Japanese watchmaking at their own game, and possibly, in fact, beat them. And where it beats them is specifically in this transparency, right? Where they're not only not hiding the fact that their watches are made in China, they are, in fact, proudly advertising that fact, precisely because they believe in the value, they believe in the story, they believe at the level of craftsmanship that can rival anything else at this price point. And I think that's not only something admirable, that's not only a virtue, but something that will, in fact, become more important and more central in the story of watchmaking as time goes on. I just want to, again, highlight a few comments that came in. John Chen was saying earlier, Ancestra looks nice, only wished it was pricier, closer to the perception. And I tried to present some ways where that price jump may be justified, and you are, of course, to make your own decision. I do want to highlight again, this was not an advertisement from the brand. I'm not supported by them in any way. This was my completely personal and unadulterated take, and I tried to be as even-handed as possible, both in terms of the brand's history and the presentation of this particular model. I hope you appreciated it. Please feel free to leave a comment and share any further questions or suggestions that you have down below. That's always very, very valuable to me. Captain Kirk says, referring to the French manufacturer Pekinier, which made the EPM03 movement for this watch, the watch industry can certainly use more movement makers. He was marveling at how they applied that hand-hammered finish to the dial blank. Wow, I was wondering how they did that. And later he says about Atelier Wen and Ancestra Jiao specifically, this is made in China on a whole different level, so involved, I would think they don't even expect to make that much profit on these early designs. Honestly, I don't know much about that, Captain Kirk. I think, you know, even at this more artisanal level, the labor costs are dramatically different when you move out of the Western world. And I'm not even, you know, China is of course what we are talking about here, but, you know, I'm familiar with certain aspects of the textile industry, for example. When you move your manufacture somewhere that is outside of the perimeters of the European Union, you know, the costs, you know, drop severely and significantly. So I think they will be doing fine. However, yes, I think, again, this is, perception was already doing these things at a certain level, but Ancestra takes it up a notch. I think this is a kind of watch that you don't even see in most serially produced Swiss and German brands, right? It's really the level of handwork that, and it is perhaps being made in China, that gives them that edge where they can offer a watch like this for less than $6,000, right? That's, I think that is value. It is a significant jump from where they were with Perception, which was, again, basically below 3,500, right? To speak in terms of the GPHG, the so-called Oscars of the horological world, you have two categories, right? You have Challenge and you have Petite Aiguille. Petite Aiguille is anything that is cheaper than 10,000 Swiss francs and more expensive than 3,500, whereas Challenge is less than 3,500 in Swiss francs. So you have a jump of an entire category, basically, right? Perception can be nominated in Challenge. Ancestra, you have to step up to petite aiguille, right? Which is, basically from being a budget piece, you are getting to affordable luxury all of a sudden. John Chan says, thanks for sharing. By the way, are you buying the Ancestra? John, I'm not doing the usual, poor me kind of thing, but I am pretty much broke at this point. So I won't be. But if I actually had something to spend on a new watch, which is a luxury that I don't have at this moment in time, I would actually buy it, and I would go with the Arabic numerals, I think. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. As I was saying, that when I was watching on my own those videos from the enamel workshop, some of the colors that they didn't end up using looked very interesting to me. So maybe I will be lucky enough down the line where they will perhaps have a different case material, different color of dial, where I will be able to get a piece of it. I look forward to that. John Chan says, your thoughts on those lugs on the Ancestra? Let's get a closer look. You are saying the case and lugs don't appear to be crafted from a single block of metal, but the lugs appear to be soldered onto the case. Now, if you're still there, please tell me what do you prefer? Do you prefer cases that are created seemingly from a single block, or where you have lugs that are soldered or welded onto the case? Because traditionally, right, the form, having certain kinds of elegant soldered lugs can be in a way preferred. In this case, again, what we have is a compromise, right? You get the aesthetics of soldered lugs, which have kind of a storied past, right, with elegant dress watches especially, but you have here basically detached lugs, right, where you have internal screws with external bolts that are engraved with certain motifs, and that's what you are seeing outside, right? This is the bolt that secures the internal screw. So they are in fact a separate piece, the lugs, but that they are not welded or soldered in the traditional, more artisanal way, but secured in this slightly more industrial way that doesn't take away from the aesthetics of the piece. But yes, it is a certain shortcut, right? But I imagine if this case was made with actual artisanally welded lugs onto the case, we would probably be talking about $7,500 watch rather than, something that's less than $6,000. So again, you win some, you lose some. I prefer single block. Well, in that case, I think it disappoints you on both accounts. So it doesn't quite make the artisanal standard of having kind of like the welded lugs. But again, like, if you're going for this sort of design flourish, right? Again, I don't know if you particularly like the case or not. I'm not sure if you would actually gain anything from having a single block case. Right? You would probably be better off having a more simplified design if you're going for a single block case already. Here, they wanted to have those distinctive shouldered lugs, and they came up with a practical solution of having that aesthetic with something that is probably easier to produce on a serial level. Yeah, exactly. Like Captain Kirk says, and like I just said, single block would interfere with that line detail. But yeah, I'm very, honestly, one would want to see this in person. Again, since I'm not part of traditional watch media, I did not have a hands-on experience with one of these pieces. Hopefully, in due time, I will, and I will report back once again. But what I can see from the visuals provided, from the videos that they have put on their own channels, I'm quite impressed. I think there's a lot of added value. It's a worthy new chapter in their story of, well, it's a worthy new chapter, let's put it this way, in the story of this Franco-Chinese brand, which now, in fact, has a specific French-manufactured movement that is superior to what they were using previously. And I think the price point is not too scary, even though it is quite a significant jump from what they sold previously. All right, so before we take off for the day, please hit the like button. Hi, Ryan Hoffrey. Nice to see you, man. Please hit the like button. Please leave a comment. If you have any further questions about Atelier Wen, about Ancestra specifically, feel free to ask them below. If you want to support the channel, of course, YouTube provides you a few different ways. I describe some others down below as well in the video description, in the caption. I would very much appreciate that. As I always say, I'm fully independent. You are my only master, but that also means that I'm completely beholden to you, dear audience, for everything I do here. And if you appreciate the work I provide, the work I put into this channel, and the kind of value I provide, the knowledge and insight I produce on a daily basis on Instagram and here, please feel free to contribute. Otherwise, again, just clicking the like, giving the comment, sharing the link with other collectors is also very important. With that being said, thank you again. Please stay safe, stay healthy, wear and enjoy your watches. I will see you in the next one. Thank you.